We're going to do the presentations, although Mike's going to do all the hard work. Yesterday, we got to share the excitement of the developer preview of Windows 8. But today, we want to share with you our excitement about Windows Server 8 developer preview. This morning in the keynote, we were able to highlight really one small area of Windows Server 8. So what we're going to do in this session, we're really going to try and jam-pack it full of demos. We're trying to show a lot of things, not spend a lot of time telling you about it and doing a lot of slides. So we've got 7 demos we're going to get through. Of course, there's many other sessions going on over the next few days where you can get in-depth on each of these. One thing I want to remind people, that this is a developer preview. It's really about you, the software, and the hardware community getting access so you can start building on the platform we've developed. It's really not for IT pros to roll out in any kind of development environment. And we'll make sure it's clear at the end about where you can get the bits if you already don't have them.
Oh, technical difficulties.
What? We're going to do it that way.
Good
Okay.
old-fashioned.
This morning in the keynote, Satya talked about that we were really building a platform for developers to create continuous services. And one of the things Microsoft does is we run some major global world-class cloud services. And at the core of those services is Windows Server, is heavily used. And our goal was to take that learning and really translate it into the Windows Server 8 product so that we can take everything we've understood from doing that and really make it broadly available. So when we think of public cloud, we think it's important that to lead as a cloud provider, you not only have to build clouds, but you have to operate them. We also have talked about the combination of developer and operations, that close cycle, a virtuous cycle where we learn from operations, we feed it back into development, development feeds it back into operations, and we continually improve our ability to deliver at scale. So our goal was really to take as much of that knowledge and learning as we had and put it in the Windows Server 8 release. And that's been one of the underlying themes of what we've done. Windows Server 8 is a release that's cloud optimized for businesses of all sizes. Whether you're a small business and all you're doing is backing up to a cloud service, or you're a major enterprise building a private cloud service to run your business on. So we believe we have something for everyone in this release, from single servers to large multi-node configurations, clusters of machines operating together. That's been one of the driving things, enabling people to cloud optimize their IT. So when we do the session, we're going to break it into 4 areas. These were themes that we developed as we were building and planning the release. And these 4 areas were beyond virtualization, really taking the knowledge from the cloud work we had done, plus virtualization technology, and building on that. We also heard from customers that the cost of operating, managing, updating their servers was something they would like us to work on helping them reduce, and at the same time continue to reap the benefits of commodity economics from scale-out servers. And we think of that as the power of many, the simplicity of one. Developers also want to build a single application that they can run on a private cloud, in a hybrid environment, or on a public cloud. And we'll talk about our developer platform story. And then finally, one of the things we're seeing is the modern workforce. Modern devices, people want to access from a variety of form factors into corporate systems. At the same time, they may be mobile, they may be remote, but IT often has requirements to check the integrity of the data access, audit it and log it, and you'll see things we've done there, what we call claims-based access, where you can do much finer granularity. So these are the 4 themes Mike's going to lead us through. We have 7 demos, as I said, so we're going to keep moving as quickly as possible. So I'm going to hand over to Mike.
Great, thanks, Bill.
But the clicker doesn't work.
Yeah, and so I'll drive from the keyboard here. So just to start out with, when we look at going beyond virtualization, we see a lot of our customers moving just past doing standard virtualization and consolidation of their environment and really trying to build out their cloud services. And so we're going to, on each one of these slides, you'll see a number of features and technologies. We're going to provide some demonstrations of it. We're not going to get through everything that we have in this product. It is a very broad and deep release for Windows Server. There are tons of features. We really encourage you to enjoy all the rest of the sessions that we will have and to dig deeper as you go along. One of the areas that's obviously very important is the foundation in this space is Hyper-V and the ability to do virtualization. And so we've really increased the scalability of the underlying hypervisor and also added a ton of new features to support it. You see us adding great new storage capabilities that Brian demoed in Satya's keynote this morning. You see a demonstration of some great new networking technologies that we're taking to the standards bodies to provide new capabilities to move workloads around within the data center and then also to move workloads beyond the data center and up into the cloud. And then, of course, as more and more of our customers work in a hybrid environment, being able to utilize the capabilities and bridge from their on-premise environments to the public cloud is important as well. And so making those connections securely and providing the infrastructure to do that is going to be important. So with that, I'm going to bring Jeff up, and Jeff's going to run us through a quick demonstration of Hyper-V.
Great. Thanks, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, everyone. So let's switch on over. Right on over. So first thing I want to say is that Windows Server 8 is really designed to be the most cloud-optimized operating system we've ever delivered. And I'm thinking about it in a number of different ways. And again, we're only going to scratch the surface here. But number 1 would be scalability. Number 2 would be leveraging the hardware. Number 3 would be ease of manageability. And finally, number 4, one of the most important, near and dear to our hearts and your hearts, is VM mobility. We want to provide best-in-class virtualization mobility. Well, let's start off right off the bat with virtual machine scale. So I've got a system, here's a VM running 12 virtual processors. Now, we heard from you that we needed to provide support for more virtual processors running within a virtual machine to provide support for large scale-up virtual machines. Now you can see this is 12 virtual processors in a VM. How about 16? How about 32 virtual processors in a VM? No problem at all. Now, unfortunately, those machines don't grow on trees, but if you go down to the show floor, you're going to see there's at least one partner down there that's showing 32 virtual processor VMs running right now today on Windows Server 8 Hyper-V. Now, in addition, we've also upped memory pretty dramatically, 512 gigabytes of memory per virtual machine. In addition, if you go to storage, you can also see that with our new VHDX file format, we now support up to 16 terabytes of storage per virtual disk. And of course, we support just almost an unlimited number of virtual disks, so you're going to run out of physical storage long before you run out of virtual storage. Now, one thing that's important to note when it comes to this scaling we've done within the virtual machine is we've introduced this concept called guest NUMA. So for example, for developers, this is important for you to know because if you're writing scale-up applications that are NUMA-aware, you want to make sure that your applications are written with best thread allocation and memory allocation in mind. Well, the good news is we take care of all of that for you transparently in the hypervisor. So for example, we make sure that your virtual resources in terms of memory and processor resources are optimized with best locality to physical resources. So we're using that best optimization. Now, speaking of physical resources, let me show you what we're doing in terms of integration of virtual machines with your storage fabric. I'm going to go over here to the Virtual Storage Manager, and you'll see a new concept, Virtual Storage Area Networks. We're introducing virtual SANs to Hyper-V. So for example, this machine has a fiber channel host bus adapter in the machine. And we've created a fiber channel SAN. And in fact, here are the worldwide name addresses. Here's the host bus adapter. Now, what this means is now that we have connectivity of the host machine to the SAN fabric, I can now create virtual machines that have their own virtual fiber channel adapters. So I can go into Add Hardware, and you'll see a brand new fiber channel adapter that appears. And in fact, you can see I've got it here. I can assign worldwide node names and worldwide port names. And in fact, if we cancel, in fact, go into the virtual machine, you'll see, I'm not kidding, guys. I can go into the computer. I can go into Device Manager. And yes, lo and behold, under Storage Controllers, you'll see we have our own fiber channel HBA. For developers, an important thing to note here. So what's great here, number one, is we're not doing any sort of packet filtering in terms of the fiber channel HBA. So if you want to do guest clustering now, this opens up a whole new sets of scenarios for our customers and our partners and you developers. For example, you can now make sure you're doing guest clustering. If you want to take advantage of a multipath I/O within the virtual machine using Windows MPIO, for example, it works out of the box. And in fact, if you notice, I actually am using Windows Server 2008 R2 to show you that it works with existing OSs. This isn't something that you need to upgrade to Windows 8 for. We actually make sure this works great on existing operating systems. And also, if you want to use DSM software, such as, for example, PowerPath, it runs flawlessly in a Hyper-V VM because, again, we're not doing any sort of packet filtering within the guest. Now, of course, all of this, as you would expect, works flawlessly with live migration. Now, speaking of live migration and VM mobility, one thing that's really interesting is we've spent a lot of time working on live migration. In fact, one of the one things I want to mention right off the bat is in terms of live migration, you can do concurrent live migrations. And in fact, you'll see that the number says 2, but actually there is no limit. If you're on gigabit Ethernet, maybe you can do 2, maybe you can do 4, I don't know. If you're on 10 gigabit, you can go a lot higher. Basically, there is no limit. It's how much hardware you want to throw at it. You can do as many virtual machine live migrations as you want. But that's really not the big news. Here's the big news. We spoke with customers, and basically they told us this. We want to be able to live migrate a VM from any server to any server with no limits. Think about that for a second. Wouldn't it be great if I could take a machine and plug in simply an Ethernet cable and live migrate between two systems with no shared storage, no clustering? That's considered the holy grail of live migration. Well, that's exactly what we're going to ship in Windows Server 8. Let me show you. I've got a virtual machine right over here. I'm going to click on Move, and I'm going to go to Move a Virtual Machine. Now, you saw in the keynote this morning, Brian demonstrated live storage migration, where the storage was moved, but the VM stayed in place. Now we're going to actually move the entire VM. So I've got actually 2 machines with direct attached storage. No shared storage, no SAN, no clustering. I'm going to walk through this. I'm going to move the virtual machine, and the name of the second server is second server. I can configure what things I want to actually live migrate. I'm going to move everything. I'm going to move it to a new location. And in fact, I have a brand new disk, so I'm going to put it on this machine. And I'm going to click Finish. That's it. So again, let me reiterate what I'm doing here. I am live migrating a virtual machine from one server to another. No shared storage, no clustering, simply an Ethernet cable. No one else on the planet offers this capability, and this is simply going to be built into Windows Server 8. You may be thinking, how the heck do we do this? Well, let me tell you. First of all, we live storage migrate. We move the storage resources. What we do is we copy the virtual disks, snapshots, diff disks. So for developers, you don't have to worry. The snapshots and diff disks that are important to you, those all work magically as well. And in fact, every new feature that we've developed in Windows Server 8, every one of them works with live migration. Because customers have told us they're not interested in new features that don't work with live migration. And in fact, I'm done. I have just now live migrated from the first server to the second server all over an Ethernet cable. And with that, you can see we are delivering just a few features that make this the most cloud-optimized OS. I'm now going to bring up Ross Ortega, who's going to show you some really awesome new enhancements and innovations in Hyper-V networking.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Ross.
Let me just get set up real quick. Hello, I'm very excited to be here. My name is Ross Ortega. I'm from Windows Networking. I'm here to introduce a new networking technology. We're going to make it easier for customers to move to the cloud. We're also going to make it much more efficient to run cloud data centers. So we spent a lot of time talking to customers and trying to understand what was slowing down cloud adoption. So customers want to kind of try out the cloud, kind of gradually, incrementally move up to the cloud. Basically what they were asking for is a hybrid cloud solution. And I'll show you how we do that in box in Windows Server 8. The other thing is when you move to the cloud, when you move your service to the cloud provider dictates the IP address that you have to use for your services. Now, that's kind of a problem because an IP address is just not some network address. There's a lot of policy embedded and entangled with that IP address. So in addition to network policies, you have compliance policies, security policies, and you have to rewrite all those. And that's just a big inhibitor. So when we thought about Hyper-V network virtualization, we thought, how do we go and solve these problems? So let me show you a scenario. So here I have a gaming company right here, and I'll bring up their website. So we have Contoso Social Games. Okay, so now they want to move to the cloud. So how do they go about doing that in an easy way? Now, in Hyper-V network virtualization, we're going to make this transparent to their data center. So the cloud, they've found a new cloud hoster, Fabricam Hosting, using Windows Server 8 and Hyper-V network virtualization. Fabricam's able to offer the customer, keep your own IP. They're going to bring their virtual subnet and move it into the cloud, and it'll be seamless. And so it's hard to show this to you because it's so seamless. So I have in this website right here a little network diagnostic tool called Traceroute that's going to show you the number of hops the packets take to get to their destination. Because when we move it to the cloud, this virtual subnet, it's totally transparent. Everything's just going to work. And so I need to depend on this thing. So just remember, 2 hops. 2 is going to be very important to the demo. So we want to move to the cloud. So how do we go and do that? Let me stop this VM. So I'll pause it right here. Let me close IE and bring it back up just to show you that it's not working right now. So that's by design. So now we want to go to the cloud. So we export the VHD, and we'll move that to the Fabricam hosting. So let's go to our hoster. And so all the hoster needs to do, so it's not working, which we expect. And I'll run PowerShell. So I'll do a policy update here. So that's all that has to happen now. Just running PowerShell to manage Hyper-V network virtualization. We'll update the policies on the cloud hoster. And now we need to create a secure tunnel to connect the data center, so transparently. So again, with PowerShell, I'll create a secure tunnel. This is using Windows Server 8 remote access. So we'll create that secure tunnel, and now let me bring up the website. So we have it coming up. It's working, IPs and everything. Let me click on where am I from. So let me talk a little bit about the secure tunnel. So inbox, IPv2 IPsec secure tunnel. So we now basically are extending the cloud. So I'll have a virtual subnet. So my website hitting SQL stays on premise. We move the virtual subnet to the cloud. Nothing changed. Domain joined, that all works. All my compliance policies, security policies, everything works. The cloud has basically become an extension of my data center. So this is the hybrid cloud. So let's see down here. 3 hops. So that's the only way to know that I actually moved my subnet to the cloud, the virtual subnet. So I'm able to keep my own IP. Now the folks at Contoso Social Games had an interesting question. So that was great that they can keep their IP. What if somebody else has that same IP and they move it to the cloud? So let's take a look at that. So let's look at this, the server in the cloud. You'll see I have 2 web servers here, the Contoso web server and the Northwest Traders web server. So let me look at Northwest Traders. Bring up their website. Now let's look at the IP addresses here. So both servers here have 10.0.1.3. So I have 2 VMs. Looks like they have the same IP address running on the same server, but there's no ambiguity. Contoso gets their gaming website. Northwest Traders gets their website. So how does that work? What we do is that we do something called IP virtualization. So each VM has 2 IP addresses now. One IP address makes sense in the context of the virtual subnet. The other IP address only makes sense in the context of the hoster's data center infrastructure. So 2 different IP addresses. So the 10.0.1.3 you see here with Contoso, that only makes sense to Contoso and their virtual subnet. The same IP address for Northwest Traders here only makes sense in the context of their subnet. Now, underneath the IP address that's running in the hoster's data center that goes out on the wire, the context of the data center, those are different IP addresses. So we've decoupled those by having the 2 IP addresses, but there's no ambiguity. So again, customers can bring their own IP address. So that's how we do secure isolation. Now, I showed you that little quick PowerShell script that we provisioned the end host to set policies. But one thing we didn't do, so previously, before Hyper-V network virtualization, you would have to use VLANs for isolation. So there was a lot of problems with VLANs. One, they're not scalable, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. We have a technical talk on Hyper-V network virtualization. The other problem is just network inefficiency or network operations inefficiency. So before Hyper-V network virtualization, the VM provisioning team would go and provision the VM, and then they would cut a service ticket to the network operations team. Network operations team would have to go in and reconfigure the production switches. And we talked to a lot of customers, and we asked them, how often do you want to go and reconfigure your production switches? And you can guess what the answer is. First, they had big eyes and look at me like I'm crazy, and the answer is very simple: never. Never. We don't want to go and touch that. So VLANs are okay. They're made for static topologies, and we coexist with VLANs if you want to use that in your data center. But we don't depend on that. We have a much more scalable solution to do secure multi-tenancy. Now, we've decoupled these IP addresses. So again, the IP address makes context in the virtual subnet, different IP address in the context of the data center, and that enables new opportunities for us. So power and cooling have become dominant costs in the data center. And so the Fabricam hosting guys had an interesting observation. The game websites tend to run hot all the time, but they just happen to run a lot hotter from like 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. The financial websites and financial customers, their traffic kind of ends up dying off around 10 p.m. and gets cooler overall, so less traffic to them. And so what the Fabricam hosting people want to do is kind of corral all the VMs into one part of the data center for power. Now, we care a lot about power in Windows Server 8 and Windows Server overall. And we have offloads. We have a talk tomorrow about NIC offloads where we can drop CPU utilization to save some power. But nothing saves power like just turning off the server. I can save 125, 150 watts by doing that. So what's the problem here? Is this live migration and cross-subnet live migration. So let me talk about live migration for a moment. We've been hearing a lot about that today. What that means is I can move a VM from one physical server to another physical server without service interruption. But I got this layer 2 subnet 25-year-old semantics that I have to adhere to. And what that means, I've kind of locked my VMs into one part of the data center because I only had one IP address before Hyper-V network virtualization. So I was very constrained, and I can do where I can move my VMs. But with Hyper-V network virtualization, we can do cross-subnet live migration. Now, this was impossible before, because when I move, if I only have one IP address and I move a subnet, by definition, I need to change the IP address. And so if I'm talking to that VM and it moves machines, I have to see that, because the IP address changes. I have to drop the connection, service interruption, and that's not good. We don't want any service disruption to the customer. But now I can change the IP address. So let's see how that works. So I'm going to do a cross-subnet live migration. We'll come here. We'll see the Contoso web server. It's going to move from this VM. From this server, it's going to go to a different server. So we see that it's moved here. Let me go to the other server that it moved to. There it's running. Now, I mentioned there's those two IP addresses. We had that 10.x IP address that made that made sense in the context of the virtual subnet. But in the data center, the other address, what we call the provider address here, changed subnets. So I live migrated this VM from a subnet of 1.111 to 2.222. So I live migrated across subnets. And there's no service interruption. So let me come back to this website. Bring up IE again to bring up the website. Now here, the SQL server, everything on premise, nobody knows about this. There was no service disruption. So the hoster is free to live migrate these VMs anywhere. And this was our vision. We wanted the host or data center to conceptually take these VMs and just fling them around their data center. Racks, rows, farms, doesn't matter. As long as there's IP connectivity at layer 3, we can move these VMs anywhere, live migrate them anywhere. So that was very important to us. So everything's still working. Now, in this demo, I focused really on the hybrid cloud, how we were able to extend Contoso's social game data center and use the cloud to enhance their capabilities. But this also works just in the private cloud. So back home in Redmond, we're running this in production. So in the server and tools business unit. And there, our tenants internally for our private cloud are the different product groups. So Hyper-V Network Virtualization works just as well in the private cloud. So what did I show you? It's easy to onboard customers to the cloud. They get to keep their IP addresses. They don't have to do all that policy rewrite. Secure tunnels in box so we can support the hybrid cloud scenario. Better operational efficiency. I don't need to depend on VLANs anymore with Hyper-V Network Virtualization. Scalable, secure, multi-tenant solution. And now new scenarios for power savings and other things with cross-subnet live migration. So that's what I want you to think about with Hyper-V Network Virtualization. Now, we have a demo. So this demo right here, there's a rack down at the Floor Expo. So we have that demo. We have a similar demo in the Dell booth on the product floor. We have a technical talk tomorrow. There's a small typo in the written pamphlet. So our talk's tomorrow at 10:30 in the hosted cloud track. So please join us tomorrow. And so when you think about clouds and building clouds with Windows Server 8, I want you to keep one thing in mind, whether that cloud's a private cloud, a hybrid cloud, or a public cloud built with Windows Server 8. And that's Hyper-V Network Virtualization. Thank you.
Way to go, Ross.
Thanks, Mike.
Switch back over here. So I think it's important just to reiterate here, what you saw is really kind of mind-bending. I know there's a lot there with the IP addresses, et cetera, but what we've done in the past to do virtualization of the machine and make it mobile within the environment, we're doing the same thing for networking. And so you're going to be able to take your networks, your IP addresses, et cetera, and be able to move those things up into the cloud or move them much more fluidly within your environment. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of the partner opportunities here. I think one of the areas that we're really excited about is there's a whole ton of new capabilities in our virtual switch. We didn't get a chance to talk about that here. We've got some great sessions on it. We built a very pluggable virtual switch so you can add modules to be able to do filtering, to add new protocols, to do a lot of these types of things. And our virtual switch will also provide great capabilities out of the box for doing multi-tenancy, for doing traffic shaping and quality of service. So there's some really fascinating stuff going on there. I think attending the network virtualization talks will be really important for folks to get a deeper dive into how the technology works. It all seems like a little bit of magic, but once you sort of peel it back and take a look at it, there's some great capabilities there. And then also I think there's some real great opportunities for us to produce appliances that build together the networking technologies, which we're taking to the standards bodies, as well as some of the new storage capabilities that you're going to see coming up. So with that, I'll move on to the next major pillar. And one of the things that Bill touched on is that we had these great learnings from running large-scale services within Microsoft. Really, how do you build these very large scale-out infrastructures? But one of the challenges that you run into when you build these large scale-out infrastructures is managing those things. You don't want your management costs to go up as you scale out your infrastructure. And so we really focused on how do we bring that power of many but still have the simplicity of one. Improve the manageability of these environments so your management cost doesn't go up. We're going to do a couple of demonstrations, but we built a scale-out file server as part of Windows Server 8. We saw a little bit of that demonstration this morning using the network load balancing in Satya's keynote, but there's some tremendous capabilities that are coming as part of that. And one of the key things for us is to make sure that those services are continuously available. And so transparent failover of those environments is very, very important. We saw a demonstration of storage spaces. There's some great new technology that allows us to pool disks, to work with new drives that have 4K support, to do great work with SSDs in these environments, to be able to do deduplication and thin provisioning within these environments, and all coming as part of Windows Server. And then on the manageability front, we really focused on making the manageability easy. You got to see a little bit of the Server Manager, which is the new user interface, has that great new Metro look and feel. But we've also got some really amazing enhancements in PowerShell, just a huge leap forward from where we were with 2008 R2. And so with that, I'd like to bring Jeffrey up on stage and give a quick demonstration of the management. Thanks.
Windows Server 8 is the best cloud-optimized operating system. to manage a to manage such an operating system, we need a new management experience. One that gives us the power of many servers, but the simplicity of one, and something that allows us to robustly automate everything. Here is the new Server Manager, new yet familiar. Here is the gorgeous dashboard, which is multi-machine and multi-role. It gives you a quick, glanceable situational awareness. These live tiles show you everything that's going on with your servers. You can quickly click on something. Here I see 2 servers have an issue. I can select both of those and do group operations directly on them. Gone is the task pane, the action pane where I had to go back and forth. Now, I can then drill into all of my servers, and here you see the familiar Server Manager homepage. We show you the events for a server, the services for that server, best practice analyzers, and we have a new live tile showing performance alerts, and here we're showing the features. Now this is showing you all the information for the selected node, but now as I select another one, the next one, everything refocuses in on that machine. Click full server, and notice they all show that for this. But this is a multi-machine management experience. So I can click them all, and now I see all the information for all those servers all together. Now, when you do that, you have lots of information, and so you need a new set of tools to be able to manage that. The new grid control, you're just going to love it. It's absolutely amazing. So in here, you can click to sort by name. You can add, you can do filtering. To do that, you can do rich SQL-style filtering of attributes and values. In addition, you can group things, and here I'll group them by the display name. So you're seeing Active Directory, there are 2 servers that have that, whereas the admin application experience, I have 5. So you have rich capabilities to slice and dice your data to find just the information that you need. Now here we're seeing all information about all servers. If I go back to the dashboard, I can drill into the web server, and here I'm seeing just the information about those web servers. Okay? So instead of the 5 machines, I'm just seeing the 3 servers that have IIS on them, and I'm seeing just the servers associated with that role. So this new Server Manager gives you just the information that you need to do something. Now, starting in Windows Server 8, the preferred deployment configuration is Server Core. That means if you have a rich management experience like this, you need to migrate it off the server to the client and do remote management. Now let's go through a user scenario. Imagine the case that I'm fourthcoffee.com. And fourthcoffee.com, my company's been on a recent acquisition spree. We've acquired a lot of new companies, and we are poised to dominate the world of tasty baked treats. Now, in order to succeed with this, I as an IT pro am critical to that initiative. It's my job to stand up a set of new front-end servers, install IIS on those servers, deploy the website, make sure that it's there and running, or we won't get a successful launch. Now in the past, what I would have to do is to terminal service to each one of the servers, install IIS locally on that machine, and then do a set of manual processes to deploy the configuration, to deploy the website, to test the website, etc. That takes a lot of time, and every time there's a manual step, there's an opportunity to screw up. And I don't want to screw up because I'll get fired. And if I get fired, Muffy and Buffy are not going to college. I might have to sell them off for medical experiments, and we don't want that. So we're going to use the new amazing Server Manager, and I'll show you the new Add Remove Roles wizard. Here, here we'll pick a role-based deployment. Notice that I can now install things to a VHD or to a live server. Pick the live server. We'll come down here, pick IIS. We can also now add roles and features using the same wizard. I can configure IIS. I'll add the new amazing ASP.NET 4.5. It shows me the required features. And at this point, I can install it to that machine, or instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to export the configuration settings as an XML file. Now, I've already done that before, so I won't do that here. Now, why did I do that? And the answer is PowerShell. Yes, you knew it was coming. Okay, so here what I'm going to do is I'm going to automate that deployment. So as an IT pro, I went and wrote some workflow scripts to do that. I'll now import the scripts that I wrote. And notice what I have is now this new commandlet, install IIS front end. Now that's exactly what I'd want to do. You see, the power of PowerShell is the ability to generate abstractions that allow you to think about what you want, to type it and get it. And what I want to do is I want to install the IIS front end on computer name, managed node 1, and managed node 2. Now, that's a long-running task running on a number of machines, so that's going to take a while. Let's use that time to show you the scripts that I wrote. This is PowerShell. PowerShell is now extended to provide secure multi-machine workflow capabilities. We have a new keyword, workflow. This looks just like a function, a PowerShell function, something you already know how to do, but instead when you use this workflow keyboard, we will convert that into a Windows workflow and run it across multiple machines. So what does this workflow do? Oh, you gotta love it. It is awesome. What does this do? Well, it runs a number of my scripts. It does the install IIS script, deploy web app, start IIS, and then I test the web app, and I do that within a for each loop for all the computers that were passed in. And what I do is I run each of those steps on the machine. So let's drill into those individual scripts. They're very, very simple. Why? Because PowerShell provides these high-level task-oriented abstractions. Here, to install the IIS, I use the install Windows feature commandlet, and look, this is the configuration file that I configured in the GUI, and I use it here to install it. To deploy the web app, it's as simple as an Xcopy deployment. To start IIS, I use the IIS commandlets that have been shipping. And to test the web application, I use one of our new commandlets, invoke web request, to see if it's there. We now see that it's there. Notice that the recording is done in order, and it's not linear. That's because this workflow is doing this work in parallel. What that means is, in the time it took to deploy and stand up these 2 servers, I could have done 20 or 200. That's the power of a parallel workforce, of a parallel force, workflow engine. And here I see Fourth Company is now set to dominate the world of tasty baked treats. Windows Server 8 is the best cloud-optimized operating system. It gives you the power of many servers with the simplicity of one. And now I'd like to introduce superstars Ahmed and Klaus to show you the next round of Windows Server 8 awesomeness. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Hi, everyone. So now we're going to talk to you about a couple of things. We're going to move from efficiency in multi-machine management. We're going to actually look at storage efficiency. Windows Server 8 brings state-of-the-art data deduplication that actually allows you to store very large amounts of data in a tiny fraction of their size. So we're going to show you how we can do that without impacting the efficiency or the transparency of access to that data. And then we're going to look at SMB transparent failover, being able to remotely access data and be resilient to failures and outages. So with that, I'm going to switch over here. Let me just bring up my Windows 8 server. So we all sort of know, we all realize that with virtualization, we've seen a large sprawl of VHD files, virtualization files. We all create and use a lot of them. We copy them across the networks. And we all sort of intuitively know that there's a lot of similarity within those files. I mean, a lot of these VHDs essentially have inside a lot of similar, same OS binaries, give or take an update, give or take a feature or some state. There's a lot of similarity in those. Now with Windows Server 8, we can actually see, detect, and eliminate the duplication that exists across these files. So what I'm going to show you here is we have a Windows Server, and we're using that as a VHD store. So I have my volume here, my G volume, and you can basically see this is sitting on a 1 terabyte drive, and we're not even using half of that. We're using maybe about 400 gigabytes. Now let's take a look inside of that. Let me move that over here. You see that we have a folder here, and what we have is a VHD store. We have very, very large number of VHD files that we've copied, and these happen to be different SKUs and versions of Windows. Now previously, each one of these files would be fully allocated on disk, would be taking all the storage, all the 10 or 15 gigabytes that this file constitutes. Now let's just go up and just see how much we can store this in now with Windows Server 8. So I'm going to go up to the root folder, and what I'm going to do is just take a look at the full size of that. Let me just zoom in so everybody can see what that. So we have exactly about 10.1 terabytes of data that is sitting on this volume, even though if we actually go back and look at the disk itself, we'll find that we're only using 400 gigabytes of space. So that's essentially terabytes of data sitting in 4% of the space. Now, this is great. It's great that we condense and we can get so much efficiency out of storage. But then the important question is, can I still access my files? What does it do when we try to read and write to them? Because efficiency and transparency is very important here. So now I'm going to go in and actually, let's just take a close look at one of these VHD files. If you inspect that file, you find the reason we're able to store so much data inside is that now Windows is telling us that the size on disk of this file is now 4 kilobytes. And what that's kind of telling us underneath the covers is that Windows is not fully allocating this file on its own. It's actually using, it's using the file itself as a reference to some common data in a store that is accessing through. So now what I'm going to do is I want to simulate some access to that file. I'm going to take the VHD and let's mount it. And what that will do is will basically allow us, you see it here pop up in my computer, and what that allows us to do is actually to start reading the contents of that file. So essentially what we're doing right now is actually just reading stuff into that file. Now let's simulate a write as well. I have a file here on the desktop that's about 350 megabytes. What I'm going to do is basically copy that straight into my VHD that's been mounted, and as you see, that just happens seamlessly, and it works right away. What I'm going to do next is, let me just dismount that VHD, and now let's take a look at that file again. So there's. Now let's take a look at the size on disk of this particular file. As you see here now, the size is about 326 megabytes, which is pretty much the same amount that we just copied into it. And what this is showing you is that Windows Server is able to efficiently handle writes into that file and only take the parts that are new and allocate that on disk, while everything else is kind of allocated in a common store and pool that is efficiently shared across all the files on that volume. So that's how we're able to handle terabytes of data and store them into 4% of their space. So now that we've seen that kind of... Thank you. Now that we've seen that kind of storage efficiency, what I'm going to do is turn to Klaus and actually see how we can have remote access to these files that's resilient.
Thank you, Ahmed.
Thank you.
4%, amazing.
Yes.
Now, you saw the keynote this morning where we demonstrated Hyper-V storing the VHD files and running live off of VHD files sitting on a file server. So what I'm going to show you here today is a couple of things in what happens if things go a little bit wrong with the hardware. So the scenario that you'll be seeing here is I have a Hyper-V host, and I'm having a SQL virtual machine that is running off of that Hyper-V host. And in this scenario, that VHD file is stored on a remote file server that is a 2-node cluster with a single share that's configured as continuously available. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a network fault tolerance. Let's show you network fault tolerance. So I'm going to simulate a failure of one of the network adapters that are sitting in the Hyper-V host, and you'll see that we will fail over to the other network adapter without causing any interruption to the SQL server. Now secondly, we'll see node fault tolerance, where I'm actually going to simulate a power failure of the active node and then see that the file share moves over to the second node, and the connection is reestablished. Now let's go into our environment here. So first, I just want to show to you, similar to what you saw this morning, that this particular machine is indeed stored on a remote file share, as you can see from this UNC path. Now, having looked at that, let's go take a look at what is actually going on inside of this SQL VM. So I'm now at the SQL server, and what does it do? It does what SQL does best. It does transactions. So I'm continuously updating transactions, inserting transactions into the SQL database. And we can take a look at it from a different angle. If we take a look at good old perfmon, you can see transactions per second performed by this SQL server. Now let's jump back to the Hyper-V host and take a look at it from a networking perspective. So here I have Network Monitor looking at the two network adapters that I have in this machine. I have a 1 gigabit Ethernet adapter, that's the green line, that's currently not doing anything. And then I have a 10 gigabit Ethernet adapter, which is the blue line, which is currently being where the active SQL transactions are happening. So let me go ahead and pick the physical 10 gig adapter right here. Oops, I don't want to rename it. I actually want to disable it. So as you can see, as I switch back, by disabling, naturally I lose the connectivity on that particular network. So what's going to happen here is that, well, it already happened. See, what happened was transparently failed over to the 1 gig Ethernet adapter, and the activity picked back up there. And if we switch to the SQL, well, we saw a quick limp in transaction that just had a small stall, and then it picked right back up, and completely transparently, we can see that the SQL query is still executing. Thank you. Now let's move to the second part. So here, you'll see that this is the file server that is currently serving the file share that the VM is running off of. If we take a look over here, we can currently see that we are running on the node that is called file 12. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be very rude to that particular server, and I'm going to go in, and because the server is in the expo hall, I can't really power it off here, so I'm going to use the integrated lights out, and I'm simply going to do a cold boot of that server. And naturally, you want to do that? Yeah, I do. And let's switch back. And what's going to happen here is that the failover cluster is actually going to detect that that particular server went offline within a few seconds, and then it's going to move all the resources from that server, as you can see, over to the remaining server. And then when that is done, the Windows Server 8 SMB client and SMB server is going to start to recover from the outage by reestablishing the SMB session and reestablishing all the file handles and all the status underneath Hyper-V and the SQL machine. It will not even notice. So let's go take a look on the Hyper-V server. See, we still got traffic. And if we take a look at the SQL guest, our query is still executing. And look at transactions. We had a small outage, but we're back. Now, so this demonstration you saw was using Windows Server 8 Hyper-V against a Windows Server 8 file server cluster. Now, this works equally well if SQL was running directly storing its database on the file share. And it can also work well with your application. And we're going to talk more about that in details in session 4 tomorrow at 4 at the Marriott. Thank you.
Awesome job. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think you can see that we've made some fairly substantial improvements in the technologies that we have here. I'm just going to move along fairly quickly in the sense of time, but I just want to point out a couple of things. When Jeffrey was doing a demonstration there, he actually made a little quick reference to something, which was we can actually now do offline installation of roles into VHDs, both automated and from the GUI, which is a huge win for customers who are setting up their VMs and configuring and deploying those environments. There are tons of these great features that are out there. From a partner opportunity perspective, there's some great opportunity here to continue to extend and build on top of PowerShell. Jeffrey's got 3 sessions that he's going to go through and talk about that in a lot more detail. One of the really cool things that we have is the ability to put OData and REST interfaces on top of PowerShell as well. So there's great integration with web services and being able to use that in automation. So I'm going to move on and talk about applications. Satya mentioned this today in the keynote, is that applications are the key thing that people want to deploy and run. And Windows Server needs to be the platform for every application in every cloud. And we want the applications to have a common set of tools, a common set of frameworks, so that you can build those applications and you can run them in your on-premise environment, or you can also run them in the cloud, in clouds that are based on Windows Server 8 from our partners, and then also from our clouds based on Windows Azure. There's a ton of new capabilities that we have here to be able to support multi-tenancy and to run high-density websites and provide quality assurance and sandboxing so that you can put lots of customers into one environment. And then, of course, making sure that we support a very open platform, supporting things like PHP and Java, making sure that we're a great solution for you to build your HTML5 applications on top of. And so with that, I'm going to bring Stefan up, and he's going to talk about a hybrid application.
Great, thank you. Okay, so what I've got running up here is a simple hybrid application that starts out with some code running in Windows Azure right now in a worker role, pulling raw tweets from Twitter and pushing them into Windows Azure Service Bus. And then we're making use of a new feature in Service Bus called a topic, which is a kind of filterable queue, which allows downstream clients to get only a subset of the messages and data pulled down onto the server and into the application. And then in my case, I'm running Windows Server 8 on-premise right here on my laptop. I have IIS 8 also installed and running on it, and I also have the Stream Insight event processing feature installed. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to pull that subscription data down into our web application. We're going to stream it out in real time over a WebSocket to a browser client running an Internet Explorer 10, and we're also going to use Stream Insight to compute some aggregates off of that real-time data stream and also ship those aggregate counts back up into the browser. So let's take a look here. I've been running for the last last 35 or 40 minutes my app in the browser here. You can see across the top that I've got a number of different Twitter tags that we've been subscribing to using that subscription in the cloud in Azure Service Bus. And what's been happening is behind the scenes, Stream Insight is constantly looking at that flow of data that's coming down from the cloud-based subscription and computing in real time the number of tweets that have been made for each individual Twitter tag. Now the build tag looks a little low to me, so I'm actually going to turn it on. What I did beforehand is I explicitly did not include the build Twitter tag in my filter that was applied up in the cloud, and now I've just dynamically updated that subscription I have against Service Bus, and you can see slowly but surely that the count is beginning to pop up. And then of course in the bottom half of the screen you're seeing some of the actual raw tweets just scrolling by. So while that's sort of spooling up, let's take a quick look behind the scenes at some of the code that makes this all work. So I'm here in Visual Studio 2012, the preview, and I'm showing the use of the W3C JavaScript WebSocket API to go out and establish a persistent connection from my web browser to my server. And you can see in the highlighted code that what's happening is the web server in real time is constantly pushing both the raw tweets as well as the Stream Insight computed aggregates back up into the browser. And that just happens continuously as data becomes available. It's very simple and very easy for me to make use of as a developer. And then also peeking behind the scenes, because I've mentioned Stream Insight quite a bit, that's a product that allows you to do high performance, event-driven processing of real-time data streams. And what I've highlighted here is something called Stream Insight Link. So within this link expression, I've highlighted the piece of code where Stream Insight is actually treating that real-time subscription from Service Bus as a data stream, and it can then go out and query against it. And so, for example, I'm using the Stream Insight aggregate functionality here to continuously look at that stream, count the number of tweets per Twitter tag within a 60-second time window, and then constantly recompute that as time flows by second by second. And if we shift back to the browser, we'll see, sure enough, that build tag count has popped up. It's popped from about 20 up to about 38 tweets per minute. So that's sort of proving the fact that, yes, without me making any code changes, I was able to dynamically change that filter that I have running in the subscription up in the cloud. So in closing, you've seen real briefly here a little hybrid application that has components spanning both items running in Azure in the cloud as well as on-premise. In our case, we leveraged the high-scale messaging capabilities of Windows Azure Service Bus, and we used that in conjunction with IIS 8 and Stream Insight running on-premise on a Windows Server 8 machine.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
There we go. So I think obviously there's a ton of information here on writing applications and doing the development. Satya touched on this morning the fact that we really look at it as how do you provide the continuous services? How do we provide the platform that supports those continuous services and allows you to build and enable all of those connected applications? There's some tremendous work that's gone on in IIS for scalability, NUMA awareness. We have 100-fold increase in capabilities that we've got there. And so I really encourage folks to take a look at that. Obviously, building applications on top of Windows Server is one of the great partner opportunities that Steve highlighted in the ending keynote as well. So last area that we're going to focus on is the modern work style and how we enable that. And we see changes in the consumption pattern from consumers that they're bringing their devices into the environment. And so how do we allow access to Windows and Windows-based information from any device that they happen to be using? And so we've done a lot in the product to be able to allow the access to the Windows desktop, to allow remoting with that, to do that across WAN environments, really enhancing the fact that we can do sessions, we can do VDI with VMs, and we can provide that desktop access as well as being able to remote applications. And of course, our client brethren are doing all of this great functionality in Windows Server 8 to provide the new Metro experience, and so we want to be able to provide you with that great experience in a remote environment as well. And so with that, I'll bring Nir and Ludwig up to give us a quick demonstration of how we're doing compliance, and then we'll finish up with an awesome demo on remote desktop. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
Hello, everyone. So modern organizations have huge problems controlling access to their data in order to make sure that the data doesn't leak from the organization, as well as comply with regulations such as HIPAA, SOX, and PCI DSS. This represents a great opportunity for us and for you guys to solve the problems and bring value to the organizations. Now, with Windows Server 8, we introduced Dynamic Access Control, which is a set of infrastructure investments in identity, authentication, authorization, auditing, and classification that you can take advantage of the same way that we're going to show you that we took advantage of in this demo. Now, this demo is specifically built into the platform on the file server. We are actually able to control access to data on the file server by defining central access policies that govern who can access what in the organization. And as you can see, we have now central access policies defined on an Active Directory, which the file server pulls from, and then that governs how clients can actually access that file server. These central access policies, if you can think about it, are really an ACL on steroids, which allows you to actually use what the information is and who the user is in order to be able to govern access to that data. Now, when we look at Active Directory and such a policy, say I'm the information security guy in an organization, I can go ahead into my Active Directory, and I can use the Active Directory UI now to configure a central access policy. I have two central access policies here. One is a departmental access policy, which basically says users can only access files that belong to their department. The second one is a high business impact policy, which basically says if it's a high business impact file, then only a specific set of users can access it. Now, Ludwig is going to show you how this looks like from the information worker side.
Great, thanks Neil. So as Neil has mentioned, he has configured two central access policies. One is a departmental policy, which says that users of department X can only have access to that department's data. And second is anything which is high business impact data should only be visible to specific users. So let's go and take a look at those in action. So here we have a client and we have logged in as a client, as a user Tim. And based on the claims information for Tim, we actually see that he is of the department operations. So based on the central access policy, Tim should only have access to the operations department data. So let's try that. If we go to the department share, if you go to the operations directory, he sees all the data. But should he actually try and want to go to finance data, he gets access denied. But this, what we have also done is actually reimagined how access denied actually works within the enterprise. Most of the times when users get access denied information, they are left scratching their head saying, what, I should have access, what's going on? But we have extended that to provide contextual information which is configurable. And here you can see that the administrator can suggest why the access was denied, plus workflows for users to say, hey, I should have access, send a note to administrator to give me access to that content. So now let's take a look at the file server, which was configured for making all of this possible for Tim. So going back to the file server, we see that the same set of shares. And what happened was, based on the central access policies which were defined, the content owners were able to go and classify these folders based on the new classification mechanisms that we have put in Windows Server 8. They can actually go and mark the data as finance data. All of these properties are coming directly from Active Directory. They are fully configurable and extensible. And as Active Directory is a single repository for all of your resource properties. So here the content owner went ahead and marked it as finance, and Tim actually lost access to it directly. So here we have seen how using manual classification, where content owners can actually go and mark this data, they can control access to enterprise-wide data. But wouldn't it be really cool if, as new data comes in, you are automatically able to classify it and restrict access to the data? So let's take a look at that in action. Let's say there was a public share, and somebody mistakenly copied some customer sensitive information such as credit card information or something like that on that share. Remember, we had a central access policy which said any high business impact data should only be visible to specific users. Let's go and try that. Let's go back to Tim, and ideally he should not have access to that to that document. Let's take a look. He doesn't even see the document. That's because what happened was the file server administrator had configured automatic classification which searched within the document, found sensitive information, and marked it as high business impact, and there was a central access policy which actually governed access to that data. So here we have brought everything together now. So thanks. So to put it all together, we have really reimagined how the access control actually works in an enterprise, providing dynamic access control, tying in concepts of Active Directory, Windows security, and file server classification to provide rich extensibility as a complete framework which can really help solve some key customer scenarios which the developers can extend with for compliance scenarios such as HIPAA or SOX or whatever. You can find a lot more information on this in our in-depth session Thursday morning at 9, so please join us there. And there with that, I invite the next superstar, Gaurav, on the stage. Good job. Thanks.
All right, who here is excited about Windows Server 8? I know I am, and I know I'm the last demo between us and lunch, so I'm going to make it quick. All right? So almost all the demos you saw today use remote desktop in some way or the other. What I'm going to do is show you how we have reimagined the Windows desktop, remote desktop experience to let users get access to their apps and desktops wherever they are, whether they're at home, work, or their favorite coffee shop, to truly enable the modern, flexible work style. So let's get started. At home, I just brought this brand new Windows 8 PC, and I want to get to my work resources. What do? All of you must have seen the keynote yesterday. We have a new Metro-style remote desktop app. And we want this app to be the one place you come to access all your apps and remote desktops. So you go into remote desktop. Since this is a brand new PC, there's really nothing much on the home screen, but you can get to the app settings and go to subscribe to your corporate published resources. This is just like you sign up to get your email. Now you get your apps and desktops just with your email ID. So I enter in my corporate ID, and you'll see that since this is an unmanaged machine, it's going to prompt me for my corporate credentials. And boom, you have your Contoso Corp apps right there. Now, a lot of you are familiar with running Office-style apps on remote desktop. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Remote App, which is our technology that's existed since Server 2008 that allows you to just launch a single program and remote out its UI elements to the end user. So what I just did is clicked on Excel, and as you would expect, it threw you back into the desktop, and we're going to launch Microsoft Excel 2010 from the remote desktop servers that are running inside Contoso Corp's data center. So there you go, right from home, you're able to get to your work resources very easily, very seamlessly. Now, there are two phrases that you heard all over yesterday: touch first and fast and fluid. What we have done with remote desktop is actually put this in practice even when you're remoting. So now I'm back at work, right? And I get to my work desktop. This is a nice and shiny multi-touch machine. This actually supports 30 touch points. Yes, that's 3 people using the machine at the same time. In remote desktop, we support up till 10 touch points now for this developer preview, which we think is more than enough for most human purposes, right? Let's get in as usual. We want you to get back to the Metro-style remote desktop app. Let's get into remote desktop. It's now a familiar user interface for you. You have the same apps that are published by your IT administrator, and you see a couple of favorite remote desktops because you've been using these day in and day out, right? So what I'm going to do is tap on this bottom green tile that you see on the left corner. And since this is a corporate machine, a managed machine with group policy, you'll notice that I'm taken straight into my remote desktop. It uses my locally logged on credentials to single sign on to the server. Now, this could be your remote desktop server, your VDI desktop, or your physical desktop. And boom, we are inside our remote desktop server. Like Steven showed you yesterday, you just swipe down from the top or bottom to see that you're now inside your remote desktop session. Now, this is not good enough, right? I mean, you want to see apps in action when you're over remote desktop. Let's first start with a simple 3D application. Again, remember, this is a touch machine. I'm going to start with a single touch point and see how you can rotate this 3D model. 2 touch points to zoom in and out. All right, let's take it a little bit, a 1 notch higher. Let's go into a full screen immersive mode, right? This is a Surface TouchPack Lagoon application. There should be audio coming, which it is, and you'll notice that I can interact with all my 10 fingers. We support 10 touch points with this application to scare these fishies away. And just in case you forgot, you're still over a remote desktop connection. Now, this is great, right? But we all know that we are either developers or IT pros, and we just don't always deal with one desktop at a time. We are always connected to multiple remote desktops. So let's go back to the home screen and connect to my remote desktop session host, formerly known as terminal server. You see our beautiful, sexy server manager UI up there. And if you swipe from the top, you now see, just like your modern Internet Explorer 10, you see you can easily switch between 2 remote desktop connections. If you go back home, and let's say you're bored of working and you want to play a game, let's go to the start screen. I'll pick my favorite new Metro-style game, which is 5 in a row. And while I'm playing the game, if I want to keep an eye on my remote desktop connections, I can always switch between them, or I can get to my local desktop, or I can also get to my remote desktop. So there you go. You have a live preview of your remote desktops while you're playing your game. You can watch what's going. If you are running one of those cool PowerShell scripts, you can see them going right here while you're playing your game. And very easily get on to the bigger view and interact with your remote desktop session. So this is it. Remote desktop experience in Windows Server 8 is super awesome. If you want to learn more about this, we have 2 sessions tomorrow. At 10:30, we're showing a ton of more demos on the same subject. And at 1, we're going to show you the partner opportunity, the multi-million-dollar partner opportunity with RemoteFX. Thank you very much.
Good job. Thank you. All right, we're at the end here. I just wanted to hit on a couple of points there. I think the capabilities that we have as part of Remote Desktop are going to be great for our partners to build on top of. There's great capabilities there. And we're enabling all this new access to the environment, but we're also taking our business customers' thoughts in mind to make sure that we've got the compliance mechanisms. And so there's extensibility points in the compliance mechanisms so that you can add filters and functionality there that I think are great. And with that, I'll bring Bill back up on stage with me.
We click.
And we actually got a clicker.
So first, thanks. I appreciate everyone staying like 10 minutes over, but we just had a pile of stuff, and we really wanted to show it to you and let everybody go through their demos. We not only reimagined Windows 8, as you can see, we reimagined Windows Server, multiple machines, rich interaction styles, different ways of doing claims-based access. Today, we really only touched on a small number of the features. You'll see on the screen, scrolling past many of the other things we've done. We've literally got hundreds of new features in this release. We think there's fantastic opportunity for you as software developers, some of you are in the hardware development business, to build on this platform. I'm going to let Mike just finally wrap up.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, everybody should have gotten a little USB key. There's a copy of Windows Server 8 on there for you to use. We also have a bit bar down in the expo area, and you can stop down there, and if you want to load up, we have ISO images, and we also have pre-configured VHD images available there as well. We've got session tracks, and look for the cloud and server track, and I really encourage everybody to take advantage of that. We'll be providing a lot more information about Windows Server and Windows Server 8, and we're really excited. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.